We've all moved here fairly recently. And I don't know about you all, but with moving comes all the address changes, all the insurance coverage changes, all the people that you've got to reach out to. And if you're like Christine and I, we've been on the phone a lot. You try to do as much as you can online, but sometimes you just got to pick the phone up. And I've gotten very used to, as all of you have probably, the automated attendant. Thank you for your call. Your call is very important to us. Your approximate hold time is 45 minutes. And it's easy. And then you deal with like having to get new dentists and new doctors and going through and getting that all lined up with the insurance companies. And then as we all are getting older, we have to deal with all of what comes with insurances and investments. And it really does make you start to feel like you're just a number sometimes, is my point. And we are to a large extent. We're some account number on somebody's computer screen. The one that does drive me absolutely crazy though is when I call and the computer says, either say or type in your account number and press pound sign. And so I do that and it asks for some other information. And so it gets me to a human and the first thing they ask is, could I have your account number? It's like, isn't that on your screen? I think that should be on your screen, but that's a gripe for another day. But I bring all that up to say this to you, and this is the title of what I'm going to share with you this morning. You're not just a number. We're going to see that very clearly in this passage. I'm going to focus today. We're in Matthew chapter 2. We're going to focus on verses 16 through 18. That's what the Lord led me to. We'll get there in a few minutes. This is where my teaching is different than it used to be. I normally would not have done it this way, but the Lord just got me kind of working through this, and so it may modify over time, but we'll see where it goes. Matthew chapter 2. Let me start at the beginning and read a bit of this, and then we'll talk about it and continue on. It says, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them the time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the young child, and when you have found him, bring back word to me, that I may come and worship him also. When they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. When they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Then, being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way. And when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise, take the young child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, out of Egypt I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry, and he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and in all its districts from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted, because they are no more. And I'll stop there for now. So we see the wise men. Probably your NIV says magi, where we get our word magic or magician. It's where that the Greek word magus. It's believed by most scholars that they were pagan priests, is what they were essentially. Astronomers, astrologers, and back in that day, astronomy and astrology was kind of the same thing. You know, they put that all together. They interpreted dreams. So again, they were magicians. And because of what they're able to do and the tasks that they are able to accomplish, they were political and religious leaders, prominent in their land, which probably leads to why we get to the carol, the Christmas carol. We three kings of Orient are, right? Is where that probably came from. But what's interesting about that is we sing that song at Christmas, but the Bible never says how many there are, if you'll notice. Right? It never says there's three. And generally what we've come to think about that is because they brought gold and frankincense and myrrh, there must have been three of them. There could have literally been 300 of them, for all we know. And so, but if you read some on this, a lot of scholars come to the idea that they're from the east. Well, again, we don't quite know where, but probably Babylon. And I'm going to put this within the category of conjecture, okay? So, how would they know what the star was? Well, because they're astronomers or astrologers, they would notice something new in the sky. I mean, that would be probably something they'd recognize. And I don't know if you guys are into sci-fi or anything, but literally even sci-fi has dealt with what that star was. There was a real famous story written probably 60, 70 years ago that posited that it was a supernova, that a star blew up. And that's, it was kind of a crazy story, but all I can tell you is I think by reading the passage, it's supernatural. Something God put at that time for those people, because it wasn't like it just hung out there. It literally led them to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Right? And so, but I'd like to think, again, just me kind of thinking through how the Bible's put together, the fact that these guys would even know to look for a king in Israel. How would they do that? Well, who was in Babylon a few hundred years before this? Israelites, right? They were captured by Nebuchadnezzar. They were taken to Babylon in the late, what would you call it, 7th, early 6th century, between 605 and 586 BC. In 3 waves, they were taken to Babylon. And one of the most famous guys that went was Daniel. Right? And you look at the early chapters of Daniel, all of Daniel, you look at the early chapters, here he is with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they become part of the king's court. Stars in his court, because they wouldn't eat all the junk. They held themselves apart. And certainly Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had an episode that showed that they worshipped a powerful, mighty God. So, but the latter part of Daniel is all prophecy, to the point that he's considered one of the major prophets. And so he was the one that wrote about the 70 weeks and the 69 weeks and all the numbers that would line up. And so it's not a leap. And again, I just put this within the category of, we're not certain, but it makes sense, that if they're from the east, that it might be Babylon, and that Daniel's fame would possibly be, in the writings that he created, could have been what got them to Israel in 4 BC. It's a nice picture to think about, and a lot of people posit that. But if you don't believe that, and it doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. It doesn't change your faith or anything, for sure. Why did they go to see Herod? Why would you go to see Herod as the wise men from the east? What do you think? What were they looking for? Look at verse 2.
Looking for the king.
Where is he who was born the king of the Jews? Where would you go if you're going to a foreign country looking for a new king? Go to the palace where the old king is, right?
Right.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this, if you think about it, I don't want to throw the kings under the bus, but it's like they followed the star to get them to Israel. But Scripture doesn't say, you should never hold too much to the silence of Scripture, but it doesn't say that the star led them to Herod. It's like the star led them to go, but then it almost seems like they kind of said, well, obviously we've got to go see the king. And so they went to see Herod, right? And so one wonders if they just kept their eye on the star, maybe if they bypassed Herod altogether, right? Just gone where they needed to go. Just me saying, I don't know. Herod, and this is important because this is going to feed into really why I'm bringing this to you today. Herod, this is Herod the Great, and he died very shortly after these events. He had been around for a number of years, and I won't get it. I would encourage you, if you don't know a lot about Herod the Great, go Google that and go read in Britannica or something about Herod the Great. He was in really high circles. I mean, he was hanging around with people like Cleopatra and Caesar and people like that. He was all part of that. But he was despised by most of the people who lived in Israel because he was half Jewish and half Idumean. I don't know if Idumea rings a bell, but that is a form of the word Edom. He actually came up. He was part descendant of Esau, as in Jacob and Esau. So he was the Idumeans were the offshoot of the offspring of Edom, Idumeans, and so he was not well liked. Now that's part of it. The second reason that most of the Israelites had a problem with him directly was because he was a major builder. It's Herod's temple, the second temple, that was under construction during Jesus' lifetime, his earthly lifetime. And if you recall, probably the greatest building time in Israel's history had been under Solomon. But Solomon had taxed and taxed and taxed and taxed the people to the point that when he went off the scene and his son Rehoboam came in, that the people said, "Stop taxing us so much." And he said, "I'm going to do worse than Dad did." That's split the kingdom and all that. But so in order for Herod to be able to do all the great building that he did, he had to really levy substantial taxes on the Jewish people. And so he was not loved for that. The other thing that we just to help us kind of grab on to who this Herod was, and you get a picture of it in 16 and 17 and 18, is that he was incredibly murderous. He was never confident in his role and where he was. I mean, he had been named by Caesar to be the king. So, I mean, he had that edict behind him. But he was coming in and had several wives, and he had married into the Maccabean family, so he had that going on. And the Maccabees were obviously, because of what they had done in the couple of centuries earlier, were very popular. But his favorite wife was, I believe she was Maccabean, his favorite wife, and he started to get a little antsy about her, and he wasn't confident about his role. So he murdered her and her two sons. He murdered his brother. I mean, he murdered everybody that he thought was going to get in his way. And so it's not a surprise that when he thought this baby king of the Jews was here, why he would go about murdering all the boys under 2 years old in Bethlehem and its environs. And so that's Herod. And I want to use him to go to what I believe the Lord wanted me to really share with you today, which is a picture of Satan versus a picture of God that we see in this passage. Okay? You guys have probably heard the idea of all through the Bible there are types, right? This is a type of this. In other words, it's an illustration of this. I see Herod very clearly in this passage as being a type of Satan. He really is. And so what do we get from that? Remember, the sermon title is, "You're Not Just a Number." Herod cannot have competition. And so he issues this death warrant that we see in this focal passage in verse 16. I mean, he was angry at the wise men that they left, but he was really concerned about who this king was, and so he orders the murder. And it's been said that Bethlehem was a small town, but it does say its environs and I've read a fair amount that says, it might have been 20 babies that were killed. But come on, 20 babies? I mean, that would get national news, would it not? I mean, so I don't think you diminish it by saying, well, it wasn't like it was 1,000. If 20 babies are murdered by somebody, that's international news. And so that's despicable what he did. I believe that Satan, as we look at the Word of God, is in a similarly desperate situation. He is not in a stable position. He's holding on to what he has, absolutely with a death grip. And he knows the Scriptures, so he knows he's ultimately going to lose the battle. I mean, it's right there in front of him. And yet, he's taking as many with him as he can. John 10:10 says that he comes to steal and to kill and destroy. 1 Peter 5:9 says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And that's who he is. I mean, just think about how many young people today are being drug into drug abuse and ultimately dying. I mean, we've seen over the last 20 years, we've seen the OxyContin that came through. I guess it was a little bit longer ago than that. Or we lived in Hawaii. I mean, meth was just a scourge. It was taking out just people left and right and left and right. It's not like when we were young. These drugs today, you do it one time and you're addicted. I mean, there's just no margin anymore. I mean, it's not like you can kind of get away from it. It kills people very quickly. And then, we just see so many ways that people are being not just killed physically, but they're being drug away from the truth of the Scripture. We've talked about postmodernism for the last 30 or 40 years now. The idea that there is no absolute truth, that it's truth for you. That's not truth for me, because I didn't grow up the same way you did, so my truth is different than yours. And it's like, no. And trying to share with people that there is absolute truth, and you can know that. But Satan has weaseled that right on into our culture today. And that's led to a large extent to a lot of the things we've seen with gender identity and what we've seen with all the mess in our world today, our country today. And so I never would have thought when I was a young man that the thing that would probably be the greatest threat to the Christian faith, from a standpoint of people coming to faith in Jesus, would have been something to do with gender and sex. I would have thought it would have been politics, or it would have been, something else. But that would have been, because that has been the biggest wedge in the Christian community. And I don't know if you have friends that are younger people, but that I see people on social media raging against Christ and His church. That's the battlefield that we're fighting right now. And the chant that we heard in Hawaii for a long time, we moved there in 2013, and it was the next year that same-sex marriage came up in the state legislature. And the young lady who represented our district in the state was one of the rabble-rousers for it. And thousands of Christians went to the state legislature to give testimony, and more came by writing. They'd already made their mind up. Because the mantra in Hawaii was, love is love. Right? And we're like, one, we need to define that term. What is love? And then we need to define some other terms as well. But it's just this huge battle. So what it's done where we used to live is if you don't agree with that, then you're my enemy. And so Satan has just driven that wedge right in there. And I know God can repair anything, God can fix anything, God can redeem anything God desires to redeem. But at this point, it just seems like there's literally millions of people who decided that the claims of Christ, the claims of the Bible, are anti to what their position is in this world. And so it seems like it's getting darker. Do we need some light? Maybe just a little bit of light? I don't know how you guys feel. Does that help? Good. All right.
You can hit that one, Barbara, if you want.
Thoughts or comments on that? I don't want to just be the talker. Any thoughts or comments about
Is
what
this
I've shared?
bothering you?
No,
Being
no.
over here?
I'm not looking at that. This
Okay.
is the eye that's real
Okay,
sensitive.
okay.
Thank you.
Oh, so you got that one that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Any thoughts or questions?
But throughout generations, the younger generation has always rebelled to some degree
Indeed.
against the ancestors. We're going to be smarter, we're going to be better. That's never changed.
No, it hasn't.
Today, it just looks to us to be more obvious, I think, with gender mutilization and all that baloney going on. It's more bizarre today than what we were accustomed to.
Yeah.
But it has not changed through history. Younger generation has always had some rebellious side against authority.
Yeah.
And there's always been insecurities, like Herod.
Indeed. Well, you could go, what does Ecclesiastes say? Nothing new under the sun.
Nothing new.
Right? There's always some way, right? Yeah, and I think we probably do. I'm kind of bemoaning some of this, but the reality is this is the time we live in. We have no idea what it looked like in the 1300s or in Jesus' day or anything else, right? I mean, he lived in probably the most corrupt culture, not Israel, but the Roman Empire, right? That's probably ever been foisted on humanity, if you think about it. I mean, they were foul.
They were horrible. And God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah for the same reasons that we're going through today. So there's nothing new under the sun. It's all just repeating itself,
It's actually a worship of lust, love that they're engaging in.
So I say we need to define the term, and that's part of. I like having intellectual conversations with people, and I'm fine talking with somebody that I don't agree with, right? But I think that's the big challenge. It's like I was talking about truth. Are we going to define our terms? One of the worst words in American culture today is people will tell you regularly, if you start to ask them about their faith, well, I'm not a Christian and I don't believe in the Bible, but I'm a spiritual person. Right? It's like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah, what is that?
Nothing.
It doesn't mean anything, yeah.
It doesn't.
And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He's the truth.
That's it.
This is the truth. We know that. And what did Bonhoeffer say? Agreement in all things that are essential, understanding in things that we don't agree with, and everything with love.
Yeah. And
So
all
we
things
know.
grace, yeah.
So we need to think about that.
It is. Well, I think it's this is a little bit off the track, but just kind of bring it around. As we have the opportunities, and I hope we all do. We should look. You're talking about talking to the lady who built the church. I love those conversations, but I love the ones we get to have with people that they don't think this is true. They hate this, right? I love those conversations, but the point is, even in those situations, we can win the battle, but we may lose the war. I think we need to always stay very winsome in how we discuss with people, and I think asking them to define their terms is a great thing, but they're going to be offended lots of times,
Yes.
right?
Well, that's how, because Satan is so good at how he disguises things, when you go right back and you find exactly what it is, they were doing it back then and they weren't celebrating it then. So,
Yeah. It's nothing new under the sun. But I tell you, Satan is great at new permutations of evil. I mean, every generation has its own weird stuff, right? So, if the Lord keeps us around long enough, there'll be another chapter to this. There'll be something else behind this. I'm convinced. And, things that seem just like absolute aberrations now are going to start to look normal.
Yeah, you can't make it up. I mean,
Right.
no.
You
You can't make it up.
Especially to young people, because they didn't grow up with what we did,
Right.
as we have.
Well, one of the things, and again, this is just a little addition, that's why it's so important to know history. And I'm afraid today that one of the things that Satan is doing very
Shaping
well is just obliterating history. And you think about it, all you've got to do is go over and watch what Al Qaeda and all those guys have done, where they just they come into an area and anything that contradicts them, they destroy.
In this country, I mean, all the
Same
statues and all
Yes.
Destroy history.
that. Yeah, they don't want to, instead of learning from it.
Yeah.
You know, a good friend of ours said, it was right actually, he said, in 5 years, pedophilia is going to be normalized.
Absolutely.
And he said that 5 years ago, and I was like, oh no, it was like,
How could that
he's
be?
right.
Yes.
But he's right.
Yeah.
Look at it, it's like, okay, well, but I don't tell you who to love. Go love a child, I mean, it's like, really?
It's on its way. I mean, it really is. So, I mean,
Amazed.
just we've got to speak up and we've got
That's
to
the
vote
most
right.
horrible thing, is the
Hor-
pedophilia.
Horrifying.
It is.
But people,
I never had children, but just the thought of it was just like, oh.
it's horrifying.
Well, they had that in Rome.
Of course, yeah.
They had it in Rome. They had everything in Rome. Rome had pretty much the entire grocery list.
Yeah.
So, well, we talk about that, and it's interesting. I heard somebody say one time, you look at, if you're familiar with the fruit of the Spirit that's in Galatians 5, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I missed one. But right ahead of the fruit of the Spirit are the works of the flesh. And I mean, it's just anger and murder and bad talking. I mean, it's just, you just read it and you feel dirty reading the list. And then you read the fruit of the Spirit. It's like, this is so much better. As we've been sitting here talking for the last few minutes about this plot that Satan has, it really does get your heart stirred up, doesn't it? But then we see God's plan as it's been just demonstrated right here in this passage in Matthew 2. God, I like to call God's plan elegant because it is. It's so beautiful to read through what God has planned since before the foundation of the world. And I hope you guys all believe that. I heard a pastor one time say that when Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, God went, uh-oh. It's like, there's no uh-oh with God. God knew that. I mean, he was ready for that in eternity past, right? I mean, he's always had a plan. Yeah, I don't believe in an uh-oh God.
But like he was surprised. Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. Man, maybe that'd be a good T-shirt. I don't have an uh-oh God. That's a good T-shirt. Okay.
I like that.
But if you look at this passage, think of God as operating with a scalpel and Satan operating with a sledgehammer, because that's who Satan is, right? I mean, God is very deliberate. He has a plan for every person. He's got this in place. And Satan is just like Herod. He's just out there just trying to get rid of everything that he doesn't like or he doesn't believe in. And we talked last week about the genealogy, and just how that just all fit together all the way through. And then you think about Mary and Joseph. I mean, what if you could pick the human parents for the Savior of the world, would you have picked these two young people? But God knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it in the perfect time. Or you think about Bethlehem. I mean, it's such a nowhere little town, and yet it was there. Or these wise men we talked about, and so forth. Everything kind of fit together. But God has operated through Scripture like that, and he has in our own lives. I mean, probably everybody here could share sometimes a very narrow thread that got you from one point to the next, and how, I think about how we even came together as husband and wife. I mean, every kind of thing that we've seen that you say, boy, if I had just looked left instead of right, my entire life would be different. But God made sure that you look right, not left, and to make that happen. But, think about this. He handpicked Abram He said, get out of the Ur of the Chaldees, I'm going to send you to a place. He handpicked Moses, a guy that was, running for his life from the Pharaoh. He picked David out. He picked the disciples. How about Saul of Tarsus? Would that have been your guy? Not according to man's eyes, but he was the perfect guy. And when you start to read through the book of the Acts and the different epistles, you see, wow, he had absolutely the perfect CV to be the guy that was out there doing what he did. But often, these were the last people that you would think. I remember in 1 Samuel 16, right, when Samuel was sent to Jesse's house to pick out the next king, when realized Saul was not going to be your guy. Of course, again, God knew that. And that's a humorous thing in and of itself. I'm going to give you the tallest, best-looking guy in the kingdom. You want a king? I'll give you the best guy. Here you go. But God obviously knew what his ultimate plan was, which was to put David in place. That would be not the beginning, but he would kind of bring in that eternal kingdom. And so Samuel goes there, and he just starts going down the list of all the sons, right? You got any more? And what did God tell him? He says, man looks on the outward appearance. God looks on the heart. And that's who God is. He cares about us as people. I was thinking about, I'm going to give you time to look today. John chapter 1. Look at John chapter 1 with me. I'm just going to give you a couple of passages from John. This is John chapter 1, verse 43.
Satan, if you look at October 7th, they did exactly what Herod did 2,000 years earlier. Mm-hmm. The analogy is just perfect there. They went in and killed babies. And same thing Herod did. Satan doesn't change his tactics. The same, or his methods, he just says, his tactics. So
That's it. This is when Jesus is calling the disciples. It says, the following day, this is John 1:43. The following day, we get, you there? The following day, Jesus wanted to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, follow me. Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, we have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nathanael said to him, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Obviously, Nazareth was not a popular place. Philip said to him, come and see. Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said to him, behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no deceit. Nathanael said to him, how do you know me? Jesus answered and said to him, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. And Nathanael answered and said to him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus answered him and said, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, most assuredly I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. That's such an amazing interaction between him and Nathanael that, he says, yeah, I saw you before you got here. I mean, he knew the man, and it was important to him to know this man. Look over in John chapter 4. This should ring a bell for you. This is the woman at the well. Look what she says after her interaction with Jesus in verse 28. John 4:28. It says, the woman then left her water pot, went her way into the city, and said to the men, come see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ? And if you're familiar with the passage, and if not, I'd encourage you to read that. He knew everything about her, that she had 5 husbands, and she was living with a man that wasn't her husband now, and we got rain now. Here we are.
Here it comes.
Glad you brought your shoes. Glad you brought your shoes in. That is who God is. He cares about each one of us, every detail about us. I was talking to Christine about this yesterday. She goes, he knows the hair on our head. Yes, he does. He knows every thought before we have it. Look at Psalm 139. He talks about that very clearly. I like in the account of King Asa in 2 Chronicles 16:9, it says this, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him. Now, compare that with where it said Satan is walking about, seeking whom he may devour. That's Satan. He's like la-di-da. He's out there just taking his time. He's going to take out whoever he can take out. But it says the eyes of the Lord run to and fro. You know, the Lord is ready. I mean, he's purposeful about what he's doing in our lives. One other little thought. The Magi brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. This is just me kind of saying, maybe. God knew that this poor couple, who we know they were poor because when they came and they brought Jesus to the temple, you know, they had to use 2 turtle doves. That's the least that you can give as an offering is 2 turtle doves, right? And so they didn't have a lot. But here these guys show up, how many of them it was, and give them gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and then God says, you need to go to Egypt. I mean, they literally funded the trip to Egypt. I mean, what cool timing is that, if you think about it, right? So many are deceived by Satan because he offers them pleasure. I wrote down, why not I write this down? Matthew 7, just a couple of verses, chapters over from where we started. This is the Sermon on the Mount. This is really the first thought I had when I started looking at this passage. Jesus, as he does so often, right? It's the greatest shall be the least, and the first shall be last, and all these different comparisons. He says, enter by the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way that leads to life, and there are few who find it. You know, and you think about that in a very real sense. Satan has given humanity so many different ways that it can stumble and fall and walk away. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Right? There's only one way, and the world doesn't like that very much. And I'm always reminded, and I'm so glad the Lord put this verse in Scripture. 1 Corinthians 1:18 says, for the gospel is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to those who are being saved. What's the last phrase? My 60-plus-year-old brain just forgot. The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. That's what I'm talking about, the power of God. I'm so glad he gave us verses like that to contrast the world and what we're going through. So it's up to us to tell them, and here it is, that they're not just a number, but that they have infinite worth. End of the chapter, where we started, and then I'm done. Maybe I just read the end so we get there. Verse 19. Now, when Herod was dead, behold, an angel. You guys are still getting there. This is Matthew 2:19. Now, when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, arise, take the young child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the young child's life are dead. Then he arose, took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea instead of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned by God in a dream, he turned aside into the region of Galilee and came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene. I'm very thankful that I'm not a number. That none of us are just a number. That we have to be careful in the way we say it. God has a plan. Now, we've said for years and years, and I think this is where we say this wrong. God has a plan for me. No. God has a plan. If I'm obedient and surrendered to him, I can be a part of his plan, as each one of us can. And so, we've probably all reached a point in our life where we've seen that played out a lot. You know, but as I've been telling a friend of mine over in Hawaii who's almost 90, He says, I don't know why I'm still here. I said, obviously the Lord's not done with you yet. And I told him, I said, finish well, my friend.